Yeah, look, it could literally change at a moment's notice at this rate. I remember back when Courtenay resigned, the Chancellor. I remember one person on Twitter I saw say they were in a tax seminar at university, and when they went into the seminar, they had one chancellor, and when they came out, it was Jeremy Hunt instead. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and I'd also like to again welcome our viewers after I
Yeah, look, it
found
could
out
literally
that
change at a moment's
the
notice at this rate. I remember back when Courtenay resigned, the Chancellor.
there we go. There's a bit of an audio delay. I was just going to say I would like to welcome our viewers right now who are watching, because that initial monologue I did was apparently not broadcast live, I have been told. So thanks for joining us. It's going to be an interesting night of coverage here on Six News. But Stuart, I think we heard you actually twice then. Enjoy our... Look, I think it's great that we be able to hear you twice. Your coverage is twice that good. But Stuart Jeffrey is the host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill. Does Commonwealth Knowledge as well on Saturday nights. But again, Stuart, can you kind of, from what you've seen in your observation, kind of take us through how we got to this stage? How we got to the stage when we're saying that the Prime Minister who hasn't been in office for 50 days could be gone within hours? Like, what in God's name has happened here?
Yeah, look, I reckon part of it's to do with having the Queen die at the same time. It's just been crazy. The government hasn't really had a chance to really settle itself into any sense of normalcy because they've had that change, new Prime Minister and King Charles. It'd be even worse if the Queen died before they had the new Prime Minister be sworn in. But since the get-go, it's just been a lack of confidence in the government. Of course, as we all know, it was quite a tight race between her and Rishi Sunak, who won the MP vote, but then lost in the vote by the party members. Boris Johnson, of course, is still somewhat popular with party members. I've heard people say that around 40% of party members still support Boris Johnson. So even now there's talk of bringing him back or bringing Rishi Sunak in as at least as a caretaker prime minister.
Yeah, but like I was going to
so
say,
many
Stuart,
U-turns
the
by
other
the
thing is
government.
he might be popular among some Conservative Party MPs, but the public, what about the public here? I mean, we saw some of
Yes.
those polls late in his premiership. They were, well, actually not as bad as what Liz Truss has got right now, but they were bad. They were bad polls. And I know polls, but it's all that. But like, it was, yeah, it was not good. It was not good. I think that's a pretty fair statement.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I'm just, like that's how crazy it is. They're trying to find anyone to bring back in, to actually bring back some stability. A YouGov poll came out at the very end of last month. I believe it was September 29th. It came out, and it had a 33 percentage point lead to Labor. It predicted that the Tories would only hold 3 seats in Parliament. That's how crazy it is right now. They're trying to find anyone they
Three
can.
seats.
3 seats. It was a YouGov poll came out at the end of last month. So even before they lost the Chancellor and now the Home Secretary, a YouGov poll came out and said, I'll get other figures up right now, but I believe it was 54% popularity for Labor to 21% for the Tories. So a 33-point lead, the biggest in decades, which is why they can't have Parliament do a vote of no confidence, because if that happens in Parliament, then it means a new election. If they do it behind closed doors, it's in the party rooms, then at least you don't have to go to a new election. But if there's an election held right now, because Labor and the crossbench force a vote of no confidence in Parliament itself, and they go to an election, the Tories are basically, and to put it bluntly, screwed.
Yeah, well, I honestly don't think the Tories are going to win no matter who their leader is. I mean, they've been in office for, what, 10 years? Something like that. I really should have that figure off the top of my head accurately, but nevertheless, they've been in office for about a decade, let's say that. They don't have a general election scheduled for like another 2 years, because they have these like 5-year terms, which, given out the longest we can have here in Australia is 4 years in, states, so, that's something. But yeah, apart from, Boris Johnson and maybe Rishi Sunak, although he did lose the Conservative vote, who else could lead the party? I've heard names like Jeremy Hunt thrown around, Penny Mordaunt, Tom Wallace. I mean, again, it's the high-profile people seem to be the ones facing scandals and anger from the public. So, what are the options here? Who is left here?
Look, when it comes to Jeremy Hunt, I think he's always going to be second fiddle. I don't see any way for him to win. He lost to Boris Johnson. He didn't even make it through the first round at the last when they had that vote back in July, September. He didn't even make it through that first round of MPs voting. So although his name's definitely being thrown around a lot, I don't think you're going to see him getting in anytime soon. He's one of those people who's popular enough to be high up in the chain of command, but not popular enough to actually be the prime minister or party leader himself. So I definitely don't think he's in the picture.
You don't think it? All right. And then, in terms of what we could see, if there's an election, theoretical or not, or even, if there's one called now, if there's one called, or if there is one when it's, scheduled for 2 years away, apart from, obviously, Conservatives and Labor, what could we see a makeup like? Are we expecting Labor to actually get some sort of a majority? They're going to have to rely on the Lib Dems there, because I know there are quite a lot of minor parties in the UK Parliament, which is always nice to see as a casual enjoyer of minor parties. But what could that makeup look like? I mean, Labor, I guess there'd be a Labor government, but are we talking? And this actually reminds me of what we talked about before the federal election. Are we talking a Labor government majority or a Labor government in minority? What kind of would be expected with that?
The way things look right now, I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see a Labor government, majority government, because they don't have Corbyn anymore. The fact that they've got Keir Starmer rather than Jeremy Corbyn, who's now an independent, I believe, means that they're a lot more popular because they've got the claims of anti-Semitism out of their party, so they have a lot more of a clean face. And they can contrast that with the situation we're seeing right now in the Liberal Party. Sorry, not the Liberals, the Conservatives. And so he's talking about Australian politics in the Tories. They've had so many changes in leadership, not just the party leader, but also at lower levels as well. A complete cabinet reshuffle and then some more reshuffling around. So given the fact that the Labor has that stability there, I reckon they have a chance to become a majority government. Now, it's definitely not certain. I think the way we're going right now with the talk of the Scottish referendum,
that's a whole other issue that I'm sure we'll be covering live too.
Well, one interesting thing there is that Liz Truss has generally been opposed to Scottish independence, which I think plays a role because she's been fighting against it. I believe, from what I've heard from some sources in the UK that I speak to, they've said that Liz Truss's ideal referendum would be a referendum vote by the entire country, by England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland.
Scotland being independent.
On Scotland's independence.
Oh, I'm sure the Scottish people would love that.
I don't know how true that is, but that's from what I've heard, is that she would rather have the entire country vote. And if the entire country votes, Scotland's not going to win that. But I reckon when you factor in Scotland and now also at the same time Northern Ireland, because if Scotland goes, Northern Ireland goes. If Northern Ireland goes, then who else goes? Because you've got Wales, in fact, Cornwall's had a bit of an independence movement. Then you've got the home counties, which are always going to be loyal. But you've got North England, who's pretty Labour. So it's just how far do you go? If Scotland goes, who else goes? So I reckon you've got those two big things right now. The Tories not being able to keep a government intact for more than a month, and you've got Scottish independence happening now. It's just crazy.
So, Stuart, are we talking about the collapse of the United Kingdom here? I mean, what you're saying, it doesn't look good news, not just for Liz Truss, but for the UK in its existence.
Given the fact that for the referendum that happened last time, that the SNP nearly won that, they almost successfully got the independence vote, given how narrow that was, and also looking at how narrow the Brexit vote was, and in fact Scotland voted to remain part of the EU in the Brexit vote, I reckon we're going to see Scottish independence this time round. And if that happens, or then you go, okay, does Scotland join the EU? Or do they stay separate? Because they want to join the EU, but will the EU let them back in? Because, of course, if they let Scotland in, well, Spain's got Barcelona and the Catalonia and Basque regions, and then we get independence, and the Germans have a few independence movements here and there.
It's near Australia that had an independence referendum a while back. New Caledonia? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, you've got New Caledonia.
That's
there.
it.
You've got
I'm glad I remembered. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a few movements going on in the world that are trying to get independence, and I think for the EU, if they let Scotland back in to the EU after getting independence from the UK, then it is going to set a slightly worrying precedent for the other EU nations to see that happen and then worry about the home front. So, look, even if they get independence, it then raises the question: what happens with them joining the EU? If they do join the EU, how does that affect relations with the UK? If they join the EU, the Northern Ireland gets independence. Do they join Ireland? It's just going to be a geopolitical nightmare for the rest of the decade, I reckon.
Oh, great. What a fun decade we're entering into. To our viewers, by the way, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know your questions about what's going on in the live chat. We'll do our best to answer them. Let us know your feedback. We'll read it out live. Also, we've got a poll in the live chat right now. Is Liz Truss leading the Conservatives into a little dark age? You can answer that right now, yes or no. That's in the live chat right now. And, of course, keep those views coming in. Stuart, I think the other thing is here... I know in Australia, and I go back to Australia just to try to get some, I guess you could say, perspective here. Whenever we've had a spill, from what I remember, there have been some MPs on the day of the spill or a few minutes before who have called for the leader to go. There have been a couple of ones who have done it a couple of days before, but we've had, for weeks now, Conservative MPs say she should go. That is what happened with Boris Johnson as well. What do you make of that? That is happening. That I know there's a lot more politicians in the UK Parliament than ours, but it's incredible that you just have these MPs coming out and they're just attacking their own party. Some of these are veteran MPs who have been there for decades. It's just incredible to hear that you've got these Conservative MPs who are saying, we want our leader to go. The leader who, let me remind everyone, has not been there for 50 days, let alone that.
Okay, so I'll walk you through this. Currently, there's three options for the UK right now for the Tories. What should they do? The first option, as I said before, and this is probably the least likely, is a parliamentary vote of no confidence. That will require all the Parliament voting, and if it's successful, then they have to have an election. That's bad for the Tories. The Tories will vote against that because even though it might mean you get rid of Liz Truss, it means they actually lose their own seats, and politicians aren't going to want to lose their own seats over this. So that's very unlikely to succeed. That's a last case. That's basically your last case scenario there. You've got no other options. Okay, we'll do a parliamentary vote of no confidence and rely on the Labor and the crossbench and the independents to get that passed. The second way they can do it is they can get Liz Truss to resign. And currently the pressure's on her to resign because if she resigns on her own terms, it's a lot easier for the party to move forward after that. Because the third option, and this is going to be throw the whole party into chaos if the third option succeeds. Currently, the 1922 committee governs all leadership spills and the regulations around how do you vote for the new party leader and stuff like that. And under the current rules, they can't have a vote to dismiss Liz Truss until September next year. So what we need to see is enough MPs need to be able to pressure the committee to change their rules. Now the committee is made up of all the backbenchers in Parliament right now. A lot of those backbenchers are former Boris Johnson MPs that were in cabinet.
Oh boy!
So now we're seeing some of the new one we have right now. That's the new Home Secretary. He was the Secretary for Transport. So by moving him out of the backbenchers, he can't be part of that committee. Can't help influence it. So you've got to get enough MPs to pressure the committee to change their rules. Then once they change the rules, you need 15% of MPs need to write letters to the committee to get then trigger the vote, and then the vote happens at a 50% to get the leadership changed. And that's when you go and you do a repeat of what we just had over the last couple of months with the leadership votes. So right now, that's probably what they're looking at doing, because just yesterday, or I think yesterday their time, early today our time, they had a parliamentary vote on fracking. Now, Labor put forward a motion on fracking to try and stop it, to stop fracking. And some Tory MPs have actually supported that, and they've said, we have to stop fracking in the UK because the consequences that's happening on the environment, the environmental factors there are just so strong that we have to stop oil drilling and fracking. But Liz Truss wants to allow that to keep happening. So Labor brought a motion against the government on that all of the crossbench, except for one party, Democratic Unionist Party, I think a couple of their MPs voted with the government. They're basically the Tories of Northern Ireland, so they voted with the government on that. The the government voted, of course, voted against the bill put forward by Labour. But from what I'm seeing, around 40 MPs from the Tories didn't vote. Now, of course, some of them weren't actually present, were overseas or something else like that, so they couldn't actually be there to vote. But a lot of MPs, including Sir Ian Duncan Smith, a former leader, in fact, he was the last guy to lose a vote of no confidence in the traditional sense.
Mm.
Whereas, because Boris Johnson, of course, resigned in his own terms. So he voted against...
After being pushed out, though, effectively,
Yes, yeah, he was. Yes. Boris Johnson, of course, he had no choice, but it was at least nominally on his own terms.
Officially, he wasn't forced at gunpoint or whatever it was. He did it himself, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so you have Boris Johnson, Theresa May, and Smith all voted to abstain, and a bunch of Tories voted to abstain. Now, the problem we have in the UK right now is that the chief whip said that if you vote on Labour's side, you will be removed from the party. So these MPs who oppose fracking in a matter of principle, or because their electorate is opposed to it and is supportive of reducing emissions, they have no choice but to either abstain or to vote against Labour's motion. So that put them in a bad position. So currently, there's so much pressure on the committee to change the rules because it's affecting everyone horribly.
And this is the same chief whip, might we add, who reportedly resigned, then unresigned, as did the deputy chief whip, which was extraordinary circumstances overnight. I want to ask you this. A lot of people think she's going to be gone by Christmas. By the weekend, how likely is it, do you think, Liz Truss will resign?
Look, we've got, 48 hours or so UK time? I reckon there's, I want to say a 20% chance that she resigns by the weekend. It's definitely not definite. We don't have the same level of resignations as we saw with Boris Johnson. There's not that same level of pressure on Liz Truss herself. The pressure is more so the rank and file MPs putting pressure on the committee to change their rules. So it's a slightly different set of facts we're dealing with here. So I wouldn't put them at the same level, but definitely there's a lot of pressure to resign or for the committee to change rules and have a new vote. So I want to say around 20%, maybe 25%, but not more than that.
25%. I mean, that's a fair prediction, I think. However, it kind of is similar to what we saw with Boris Johnson at the start of what happened. It started with a few resignations, and then it went up to like 40-something before he actually quit. Would you say that?
Yeah, well, the thing people forget about both Theresa May and Boris Johnson is that they faced votes of no confidence within their party. So the committee, for both of them, the committee received the 50% of MPs wrote letters to the committee and said we want to hold a vote of no confidence. They held the vote of no confidence in both cases. Theresa May and Boris Johnson won those votes, but then ended up resigning anyway. So I think that's important to remember here, is that both of those leaders faced a similar situation and they both succeeded. Despite how popular they were, they still won those votes of no confidence. So I think that is one factor that's not being considered here, is that it's not likely that it will succeed based off of history. Certainly, Smith's resignation, which resulted from the vote, proves that it can work. But because Boris Johnson managed to win that vote, even though we ended up resigning later on, shows that the vote might not succeed. It might take even more than that. The risk of having that vote of no confidence for Liz Truss to resign, because she's only been in office for a month and a half.
And what a month and a half that is. We've had a new monarch since she came into power. So it's been a busy time for her. I've heard some people say that if it wasn't for the fact that the Queen died, and the period of mourning, effectively 2, let's say 3 weeks off, you could say, People reckon she would have been gone sooner if they'd done that mini budget earlier. If they'd announced all those policies that they had backflipped on and then backflipped on the backflip and all that, they reckon she would be gone sooner. If you were, I'll ask you this: if you were an advisor, a senior advisor to Liz Truss right now, what would you be telling her? Because you're seeing her party, many in her party calling for her to go, and you're seeing resignations pile up with the worst polls since polls started being recorded. What would you be telling her if you were a senior advisor? I know it's a weird question, but I'd really love your answer there.
Well, that depends. Am I the senior advisor that just resigned the other day, or am I a different senior advisor?
You're the senior advisor who's staying on because it pays well.
Okay. Yeah, I would say at this point, probably the best way to go is resignation on your own terms. That would be what I'd be advising, because clearly she does not have the confidence of the MPs in Parliament. And taking a bit more of a legal angle for a second, and a bit of a shameless plug here, we're doing a podcast which will come out
I love Monday shameless plugs, so go ahead.
To talk about the legal aspect behind this. But the concern is, or this concern that some people have, is like if the committee is forced to change its rules by backbenchers, then it sets a dangerous precedent. So it will shift the power away from the executive and towards the backbenchers. And if that happens, that's going to potentially be quite a bad precedent for the government to have. So I reckon my advice would be to resign rather than having to go to that vote.
I reckon even if a resignation might, be a terrible look, I don't think losing badly at a general election, which I mean, it's effectively going to happen. There's really not much getting out of that. But I don't know whether she'd want to stay on and lead them to a general election. Like it's almost the start of one of those, doomsday dystopia films. I will lead, and then it just crumbles around her. But I'm just amazed that this has all happened. You were covering the Conservative leadership elections in depth on Six News, with regular pieces right throughout that campaign. The other options there, did you see anyone, going back to the earlier question about who could replace them, apart from, well, actually, no, I was going to say, based on what you saw with Rishi Sunak's support and how he performed, is he even a viable alternative at this stage? Because, as we discussed earlier, there's not many options here that I can think of.
He's definitely more of a moderate. Of all the MPs who ran and lost, all but one endorsed Liz Truss. The one who didn't endorse Liz Truss was Jeremy Hunt. He endorsed Rishi Sunak.
There
so
you
I
go.
think that's worth pointing out, that he endorsed Sunak. I reckon if this happens again and Liz Truss, of course, loses, whether it be she resigns or the vote of no confidence removes her, I would not be surprised if we see Penny Mordaunt go up against Rishi Sunak. And if that happens, I still think Sunak's popular enough to go and win to go through to the end, winning the vote with the MPs as well as the votes from the party members. So
Stuart, can I ask you, are you prepared, Stuart, to do another few months of Conservative Decides coverage?
Sure, I guess I don't have a choice.
Because I'm not, because I just can't believe we're in this situation. I don't know. How are we supposed to even cover it? Conservative Decide, Election 2.0 or something like that. Just the logistics for us to cover it. What do we do about the tags and the branding? We deleted that Conservative Decide section. We thought that was all over. Now look at the stage we're at. I
think it's still there.
It is? Oh, God.
I checked earlier today and it's still there. So I was actually going to say to you, congratulations, good thing you kept that up there. We're going to need it again. But
yeah, maybe I need to update the website more. But that's a different matter. I just really, from the point of covering this, here in Australia, I just cannot see how she could stay. And I don't know if she'll go today, but it seems very inevitable. And it seems like we're going to go through that painfully long process of finding a new Conservative leader, and then them having to probably do a mini budget, and then by then it'll be Christmas, and we'll have the first ever King's Christmas message in decades, and then that'll all happen. I just cannot believe we're at this stage. It's just I wish Australian politics was this interesting in terms of resignations and rolling coverage. We haven't had a proper spill in a long time. The closest thing we got, I think the Greens are going to have some kind of vote for a new deputy Senate leader, and then also one New South Wales Labor MP quit today. But come on, bring some entertainment into Australian politics. Is this comparable? What's happened here with get a new leader after the old one was dumped following lots of pressure, and then the new leader becomes extremely unpopular? Is that comparable with any kind of Australian political situation that we've seen in the past, be that recent, Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, or in the past with, the chaos of the Whitlam dismissal and all that? What do you think?
Well, I think it could get crazier than the Whitlam dismissal at this rate, the way it's going, because that was, I think, 2 elections back to back in 94 and 95, I'm pretty sure, from memory. I could be getting those dates wrong, but I know they had 2 elections basically back to back. So we could see similar levels of chaos for the UK. And of course,
well, I do like chaos, so I'm not going to complain about that.
At the same time as this, you still also have the Scottish referendum as well. So I think putting those 2 things together, on the level of it being a constitutional crisis for the UK, I think it's a similar sort of level as Whitlam was for us. So definitely the political and the legal aspects, we take into account the entire UK situation right now, is probably similar, just over a different length of time.
Let's keep trying to find new angles on this. How do you think Brexit plays into all of this? Does Brexit play into all of this? I don't know, because we all talk about the UK economy, and that inevitably leads to references to Brexit. And I thought we left the Brexit coverage in the past, but who knows? Do we have an angle on that?
I'm gonna go out there on a limb and say I don't think it's that relevant anymore, Brexit.
Really?
Yeah, because Liz Truss was a Remainer.
Even with the UK economy situation right now, it doesn't.
Yes, but if she was a Remainer and the party preferred her to Rishi Sunak, then I think that indicates that Brexit as a political divisive issue within the Tory party isn't as big as it used to be. Remember, Boris Johnson won on part because he could promise a good Brexit. That was a big reason why he won. That was why David Cameron resigned in the first place, was because he was a Remainer. So I reckon you look at the track record in the Tories since the Brexit vote, and you look at it now, and I think Brexit probably still is an issue, but it's definitely not the biggest issue in the party right now.
Yeah, we've got a few questions coming in the live chat right now. First of all, from Infi Aaron. Leo, do you think they'll have an early election, or will the Tories delay it till 2025? Liz Truss resigns? I mean, I want to say yes, but then I have to think about, the kind of legal part of that. Can we have Liz Truss as the interim Conservative leader who will not be Prime Minister if the Conservatives somehow win a general election and then all that? I don't know if that's... Hang on. Actually, Stuart, is something like that possible? Can an interim leader lead the Conservatives to an election, to a general election? Is that at all possible? I mean, what other option do we have here? We're kind of throwing all the options at the table here because
but that election is unprecedented. That election has to be before January 2025, from memory. So that's over 2 years. You can't have an interim leader in office that long. The idea of an interim leader is that the leader's there. It's one of the.
Well, no, I mean if they have an early general election.
Yes. So of course, one of the principles of constitutional law in the UK and in Australia is you always have to have a leader, which is why you have a caretaker prime minister until you have the next election. It's why when Whitlam was dismissed, you had to have Fraser in it and then have the election because you always going to have a prime minister. So, but again, I say if you have the election early, the Tories are going to lose that one. They're going to lose it no matter what, but they'll lose it even worse.
Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of hold on till we can, not end up as bad as the Western Australian Liberals. I mean,
Let's
yeah.
hold on until Scottish independence becomes more of a big deal than this was, and let's hope that happens. And let's hope we don't lose as bad in 2025.
We've got another comment coming in, talking about actually the upper house in the UK. Now that is interesting. Where and Stuart, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they are unelected. It's the House of Lords, and they have weird groupings, and it's kind of, weird and pointless compared to maybe the Australian upper house. What is the deal with that?
Well, yeah, we are the only one of the original Commonwealth realms to have an elected upper house.
Fantastic.
South Africa, of course, is no longer relevant because they're not really part of the Commonwealth in the same sense. They've got a president. They don't have the Queen as head of state, or I guess the King is head of state now.
Yeah,
They don't have a governor general or anything else like that.
Let's not go too far into the past.
So yes, but so in Canada, it's appointed by the Governor General for the upper house. I'm pretty sure. It's either appointed by the Governor General or by the Prime Minister. I'm not sure which, but it's appointed there for the upper house. In the UK, of course, it's the House of Lords. It's a tie over from the aristocracy. In New Zealand, there isn't an upper house, so we are the only one to have an elected upper house, which is why we have the US model, because there was no other model when we created an upper house. So,
and every state here in Australia has an upper house, bar yours.
Yes, we also are the only state to not have a lieutenant governor, so we're the odd child.
Weird. And of course, let's not forget the territories who also do not have an upper house. But that's a whole different matter. And the upper house can be some of the most fun in politics. Just look at Victoria, where we've got 20 odd parties. Look at WA, where Labor controls both houses. Look at SA, where SA Best somehow still exists, being those two upper house seats I think they have. Look at New South Wales, where Fred Niall's been there since 1981. He's retiring, might I add. And is that all? And then Tasmania, which flips the upper house and lower house for some weird reason, because it's Tasmania or whatever. But the upper house can be interesting. Do you remember seeing that video of when that Lord resigned after being late to some kind of vote?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's like the only existence of the UK Lords I remember. That's the only time I've ever seen it make any news. But yeah, I don't even know what they're voting on.
In the last couple of decades, there's been a few reforms to the House of Lords, and now they can't vote down many laws. So they basically don't have that much authority anymore.
So what is it? Is it just like a lunchtime meeting of senior citizens or something? What do they do?
I love the description of it. So they advise the monarch. I think they can vote on some laws, but they can't vote on all laws. At least the past, so they can give advice. A lot of their time is spent. I think it's between a half and a third and 2/3 of their time is spent going over bills with a fine-tooth comb and looking at every single legal issue they can find in it. The House of Lords used to have a role as the highest court in the land. That got changed in 2009 and was replaced by the UK Supreme Court. So the House of Lords it's a remnant of an old system that's being slowly phased out of fashion. So it doesn't have that much authority these days.
Do you reckon they'll ever get rid of it?
No, it's the UK. They love their tradition.
I think that's fair to see. I think we saw that tradition on display over the past few months, but nevertheless, now back to Liz Truss, where you've got these resignations, you've got all this happening. Do you think, and this gets into a bit of a theoretical debate, but is there any way at all for the Conservatives to win the next general election, whenever that may be in 2025 or early next year? Any way, any leader? Is it possible at all?
The only way I can see it right now is if the Scottish independence vote fails, then you can see the Tories win. But I don't see how that vote's going to fail. This is,
what about if Labour makes a big stuff up? Because, of course, they're the main opposition, but then again, you can have, big minor parties who can also have a bit of success, Lib Dems, SNP, etc.
well, the Lib Dems basically a bygone right now. They don't have too much authority.
No,
They used to be powerful, but not anymore.
no, but
They're about like our Lib Dems
but
now.
but but do you think could Keir Starmer do a bit of an F up, a big, uh-oh moment, and that'd blow it for him? I mean, because I don't know how the Conservatives would recover. I can only see them winning by, a big Labour mess. I just truly don't understand.
Yeah, they can't win. They can't win on their own merit. It's the next election, and I know we've had this before with 2019 and 2020 federal elections here. It's Labor's election to lose.
Except probably even more likely to lose than maybe Labour Australia in 2019 and all that. But yeah, maybe, who knows? We could see a conservative Lib Dem SNP. What are the random parties? Albia, I don't know their names. Or the Alliance Party, whole independent coalition, and that can be brought together by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. I don't know. We're really at all different possibilities at this stage. Again, leave your
Well,
comments
remember,
in the live
as
chat.
I said with the fracking vote, every single party except for the DUP, and that's the Democratic Unionist Party, that's the Northern Ireland Conservatives.
Yeah, Tory.
Basically, every other
effect,
party
yeah.
is opposed to the Conservatives, so they can't form. There's no way that the Conservatives can form a minority government. They have to form a majority government, and I don't see them getting a majority government based on the current figures.
I don't either. Again, leave your comments in the live chat right now. We've still got that poll up. Do you think Liz Truss is leading the Conservatives into a little dark age? Let us know right now. I don't want to speak too far into the future, but do you think the past... just the past 6 months, do you think that has damaged the UK Conservative Party for a long time, maybe for this entire decade?
Look, I wouldn't be surprised if it does. That's how little faith I've got in them right now. Yeah, like they've been in office for 12 years.
12 years. Oh yeah, I thought it was like 9. No,
years.
it's 12. It's 12.
2010, David Cameron won the election 2010. That's also when I think Liz Truss was a parliamentary undersecretary under David Cameron. So she goes back a fair while. But yeah, so they've had control for the last 12 years. So it's about time for a Labour takeover anyway. Labour, of course, was in power for the previous, I want to say, 13 years before that.
It's at least a decade because, Iraq War and all that. So
Yes.
yeah. I was going to ask the other thing, something I don't get, and maybe our viewers also don't get. What's an undersecretary? That sounds like a role that an MP wouldn't have.
So we actually also have parliamentary secretaries, except now they're minister assistant. They're basically what we call them now is minister assisting the minister. So that's a parliamentary secretary is a minister assisting the minister. So a parliamentary undersecretary is the minister assisting the minister assisting the minister.
That seems like a really low in the food chain role.
The UK, again, the Parliament, 650 seats in the House of Commons, 757 in the House of Lords. The only country with a bigger legislative branch is China, and that's because it's China. I don't think you need to give any more explanation than that being China.
Yeah,
so
that's the best way to say it. Just say it's China. That kind of explains it all.
They've got Secretary of State. So the UK has many tiers. The Secretary of State, Minister of State, Minister, Secretary, Parliamentary Undersecretary. There's a whole hierarchy that they have because, again, tradition.
For those of you who have been watching and not just listening to this in a tab in the background, we have been running a loop of Liz Truss images, or you've been watching me, or maybe, I don't know, the messenger version of Stuart, because we don't actually have a live stream of Downing Street, which seems inconvenient and unfortunate, but we'll bring that to you if we can. Also, Prime Minister's questions was yesterday, so unfortunately we can't bring that to you right now. PMQs,
Actually,
do you ever watch them, Stuart?
Yeah, I was going to say, with PMQs yesterday, people were surprised the fact that she didn't end it early.
Mm.
Going into it, a lot of commentators thought that she would end it early because she can do that. She can just walk out, but she didn't. Did the entire thing, and that's one of the reasons why I think she's not going to resign. I think it'll go to the committee. If it goes to the committee, it'll be bad. The committee has to change their rules, but I think it's more likely than her resigning because she went through a PMQ yesterday just fine. Of course, she faced calls to resign then, but she did it. She went through it all. She like from what I've seen of it, I've watched a few clips from the PMQ. I haven't watched the entire video yet. But that's definitely I want to watch the entire thing in full. But she came across pretty strong. That's one of the reasons why I think she might not resign, at least not yet. It's going to rely on more pressure than there is right now.
So yeah, you reckon 20% by the weekend? Obviously, there's a new chancellor who I don't know if he's popular or not, but he's definitely faced a lot of criticism, at least online, from some of the more conservative people.
We have both Grant Shapps, who's the now new Home Secretary, and Jeremy Hunt are moderates, whereas Liz Truss is more on the right wing of the faction. People have compared her to Thatcher in the past. I don't think that's entirely accurate, but a lot of the candidates we saw in the vote back in July, a lot of them were on the right wing of the party. Of course, Suella Braverman is definitely on the right wing of the party, and she, of course, has now been forced to resign as a result of a national security leak, which I'd say is a pretty minor leak. But basically, she sent a official document from her personal email account to another MP, and that was enough for Liz Truss to fire her. I reckon that Liz Truss took the opportunity to fire her. She didn't have to. So I reckon Liz Truss used that to appoint another moderate. And that actually brings you back to the Thatcher point. Thatcher's early cabinet contained a lot of her opponents, and that's why she was so popular, because she brought her opponents to the table and forced them to negotiate with her.
And then she stayed on for a while too.
Yeah, Thatcher was in there for a very long time. So, but of course, she was more popular to begin with, and she also had the fact that she was the first female prime minister as well, which definitely added credibility to her and her relationship with Gorbachev and with Reagan.
And now we've got the third female prime minister, and look what's happened. It's not gone well so far.
Yeah,
for many different reasons too. But I reckon she'll be gone by Christmas at the latest. Because I truly cannot just see her, staying on. I'm just incredible. I'm just bemused, and that pressure. I know it maybe isn't as extreme as we saw with Boris, but Boris had started slowly. So I don't know. Maybe by PMQs on next week. The other thing, Stuart, is we have to remember that Liz Truss was not always a Conservative Party member. She was with the Liberal Democrats. I wonder how they're feeling, because she is their sort of first ever Prime Minister. She's the first ever Prime Minister who was a member of the Liberal Democrats in the UK. So there's a little nice sort of true fun fact for you. So I wonder how they're feeling watching on right now. Do you think the members of the Conservative Party... You're not a Conservative Party member, obviously. Number one, you're in Australia. And there are many other reasons as well. But do you think there might be some having, I don't know, buyer's regret? I mean, she did get, pretty decent support. But from the general public, at least, it seems to have just gone absolutely awfully.
it always was awful for her. She was never as popular as Sunak was. She was popular with Tory party members. Sunak was more popular with MPs and with the general public. So he ticked 2 of the 3 boxes. She ticks 1 of the 3 boxes, but that's the box that she ticks is the most important box for becoming Prime Minister. So because she did have popularity with the party members,
yeah, it's
right now,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the number of U-turns that she's made.
Yeah. I'm just amazed by it all. I think, yeah, I reckon as I said, I reckon she'll be gone by Christmas. I think that pressure will just keep building up. Do you think it was inevitable, though, that she would be unpopular with the public? I know this is, the worst polling results in the history of polls in the UK, but do you think it was always inevitable just based on the general unpopularity of the Conservative Party because of Boris Johnson and how we left things? Do you reckon that was kind of... It was going to happen, Sunak or Truss, or maybe even some of the other candidates, or what do you reckon?
I was expecting them to lose the next election no matter what happens. I did not think they could win 2025 election. And part of that comes down to COVID, because we've seen in America and in Australia that during COVID, the left-wing party is more successful than the right-wing party in the elections. But not just that, we could tell that at some point there had to be another vote on Scottish independence that would have to come into play. Because it's been, I want to say close to decade, maybe 8 years or so. So there was definitely time to have another one of those. So I didn't expect them to do well next election, no matter what. But I reckon the fact that they've gone through all this with Boris Johnson and now Liz Truss, and if whoever comes in next, they might have the exact same problems with that person. They could have another prime minister, and based on the current half-life of the previous few prime ministers, the next prime minister could be in there for like 3 weeks and then resign at this rate. Honestly. I reckon whoever replaces her is going to have the same unpopularity with the public, simply because of the position that the Tories are in right now. It's not just her; it's the party.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. We have to remember. Do you reckon that they have been in power for 12 years? It'll be 15 by 2025. Do you reckon just the fact that they've been in power for 15 years by that date, or at least 12 now, that would contribute to it?
Definitely. I mean, look at the Liberals in Australia. Similar situation. 9 years, and they were voted out. So I reckon, definitely it's about time for a change, just based off political trends.
We're hearing from the BBC now that the UK House of Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle has officially launched an investigation into reports of misconduct in voting lobbies last night.
Yes.
Now, the vote, of course, as we discussed earlier, was supposed to be about fracking, but it was apparently a vote of no confidence as well. It was reported that some senior Tory MPs or ministers were bullying and manhandling voters in the lobby. One Conservative MP was seen in tears by Labor Shadow Minister Anna McMorrin in the lobby after the vote, so we have an investigation right now. Hoyle says he's asked the Sergeant-at-Arms and other officials to, quote, investigate the incident and report back to me. He's reminded MPs to treat each other with courtesy and respect. Bullying and manhandling other members of your party. I mean... And in the view of people who are going to report that, what do you make of that? I'm just blown away.
Within hours of the vote happening, or even sooner, Labor MPs and crossbenchers are talking about having to support Tory MPs who were in tears because of how they're being treated, or at least allegedly being treated. Although I personally believe it's probably likely that's how they were treated. That's probably one of the reasons why the Whip and Deputy Whip wanted to resign, because they didn't like doing what they were doing either. Because of, they're literally having to go to their fellow MPs and say, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're out of the party. Like, that's the point that the Tories are at in trying to keep order, is having to force MPs to vote on party lines or be expelled from the party. Like, that's similar to Labor in Australia in terms of making your MPs vote the way you want them to.
And we remind you, of course, to our viewers that the Australian Labor Party does have a policy that effectively you will be kicked out if you vote against them. We had that happen in Victoria earlier this year. Although it does seem unlikely that Labor would ever go ahead with that in the federal parliament right now, given they currently need that vote in both the House of Reps, where they got a very slim majority, 77. And of course also in the Senate, because currently they can go Labor, Greens and Pocock. They lose one Labor, it kind of complicates things. So that's the reality with our Labor voting here. Stuart, the other thing is we've had some more breaking news come in. The International Trade Kemi Badenoch, who I believe ran for the Conservative Party
Correct.
leadership. Did she? Hang on.
Fourth, I believe. Fourth or fifth.
That's rare. She said she has no intention of resigning. Following reports from Bloomberg, she could be the next MP to exit. We'll see how well that statement ages, given we had many previous MPs that, and ministers who have said, I will not resign, and then look what happened. Also breaking, Cheryl Murray, the South East Cornwall MP, has tweeted she has submitted a letter to Sir Graham Brady, who leads the group of backbenchers. We discussed it a few minutes ago. Saying despite having high hopes for Truss after what happened last night, her position has become untenable. She's the latest Tory MP to publicly call for Truss to step down. We had other anonymous Tory MPs. It's interesting hearing about the ones who are anonymous and who aren't. But we had another Tory MP who said, the next 24 hours are going to be hell for Liz, and that statement came about 12-ish hours ago. But yeah, I am just amazed watching this unfold here. We'll wrap up our coverage in a few minutes, but we are going to keep following this for you right now on social media, and of course on YouTube and on our website SIXNewsAU.com. You reckon she's 20% chance she'll go by the weekend, Stuart? I want to ask you this though. What do you think will happen in the next few days? Do you reckon we are going to see some more senior ministerial resignations, or is it going to kind of plateau in terms of developments?
Yeah, well, my 20% estimate is based on the situation right now. If we see more major MPs resign, especially voluntarily resign, which we haven't seen too much of yet, if we see that, then that completely changes the landscape, and I reckon it's even more likely that she resigns. The fact that Kemi Badenoch has said she won't be indicates to me that if she goes, she'll be voted out. Or not voted out, she'll be forced to resign by Liz Truss. But she came in fourth. Of course, she's definitely also on the right edge of the party. Definitely one of the more of the right wing MPs, being critical of trans activists and the like in the past. So definitely a controversial figure. But the fact that she came fourth in the race means a lot of MPs support her, and so of course her support helped Liz Truss to beat out Penny Mordaunt. So if Kemi Badenoch goes, I reckon that's another massive blow to the Truss at a government right now.
Stuart, extraordinary times, an extraordinary story unfolding here right now as the UK Conservative Party aims to stay intact, I guess you could say, but we will keep following these developments for you right now. Before we go, I think it's time for another plug between Parks Place and Capitol Hill. What did we cover on the first episode this week? Just completely off topic here. What was discussed? What did we cover? Who did we speak to?
So we spoke to David Shoebridge, Greens Senator for New South Wales, and Professor Graham Orr, who's a professor at the T.C. Burns School of Law, and we discussed the Greens cannabis bill, where the Greens are trying to pass a federal law to legalise cannabis, and that we discussed how you would go about doing so. If you can, how would you tax it? Or if you took a state-level approach, how would you, again, tax it and regulate it federally?
Stuart, fantastic stuff as always. Thank you very much for joining us here live on 6 News. I am sure we will be live again soon. Maybe a resignation. I don't know. We will have to keep covering it for you. We will keep covering it here on 6 News. Stuart Jeffrey, 6 News contributor, writer of Commonwealth Knowledge, host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill, and general legal and law guy here at 6 News. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us here on this coverage.
Thank you.
Stuart Jeffrey there. That is 6 News Live up to the minute right now as we continue our unfolding coverage of the UK government crisis. Again, you can follow us on social media at 6NewsAU for more. We'll have coverage overnight, 24/7. And I really do mean that. Probably not going to be sleeping tonight, which seems like a terrible decision, but nevertheless, why not Extraordinary times require extraordinary coverage, and we will bring that to you here on 6 News. Don't forget 6 News also Sunday night, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, with all the latest developments and the latest edition of Spin Check. You'll be forgiven for missing this. Came out about 15 minutes before we went on air tonight. A special from Roma McKinnon. We look at the campaign, the federal election campaign, and the media. So that is from Roma McKinnon. That Spin Check special on our YouTube channel right now. If you've missed any of our coverage, head back on this channel. It'll be available on replay. But again, 24/7 coverage on social media as well. For now, though, on this Thursday evening, on behalf of Stuart and the entire 6 News team, I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night.